She was a wonderful person, kept a smile on her face, good parent, everything. Everything about her was good.
This is Jamia Taylor, known to her substantial social media following as Maya Dabadi, a 29-year-old mother who works 2 jobs to support her family. Tonight is rare. Tonight is hers, the birthday celebration she deserves after another year of putting everyone else first. But as the clock ticks past 5 a.m., the music fades, the celebration ends, and in the cold reality of a Chicago morning, the flash of emergency lights replaces the warm glow of birthday candles. One moment Jamia is stepping out of a club on 79th Street, the night air carrying the last echoes of birthday wishes. The next, a gunshot tears through the pre-dawn quiet. A single bullet to the chest. A life extinguished just days after celebrating its continuation. 6 children, the oldest just 12, the youngest a mere 11 months, will wake up to a world permanently altered.
What my grandbabies gonna do? They don't understand what's really going on, and it's gonna be hard that their mom is not here.
They'll never again feel their mother's embrace or hear her voice reading bedtime stories. The woman who worked tirelessly as both a retail employee and security guard to give them everything will now be memorialized in photographs that capture only fragments of who she was. The contrast is devastating. Birthday decorations still hanging in her home, while police tape cordons off the area where she took her final breath. If you've ever witnessed how quickly life can change in your city, hit the like button and let me know where you're watching from. Your engagement helps stories like Jamia's reach those who need to hear them. What transforms an ordinary birthday celebration into a homicide investigation? What happens when the timeline of a life, one filled with responsibility, love, and determination, is suddenly cut short? And perhaps most importantly, who would target a mother of 6? And why? As dawn broke over Chicago that February morning, these questions hung in the air alongside grief. The investigation would reveal a complex web of relationships and potential conflicts that may have led to this tragedy. But to understand what happened to Jamia Taylor in those final moments, we first need to understand who she was beyond the headlines. A woman whose life meant everything to 6 young children now facing an uncertain future without her guidance. Her profile showcased a vibrant personality that attracted a substantial following. But those who knew her personally understood that her true identity was defined by something much deeper, her unwavering commitment to her 6 children. Jamia's social media presence revealed only fragments of her reality. While followers saw the stylish outfits and confident poses, they didn't witness the early morning rushes to get children ready for school, the late night hours spent reviewing homework, or the constant juggling act that defined her existence. The woman who appeared so carefree online was, in reality, carrying the immense responsibility of raising 6 young lives alone. Her children, ranging from just 11 months to 12 years old, represented everything to Jamia. The age gap between them meant she was simultaneously teaching a preteen about growing responsibilities while changing diapers and handling midnight feedings. Each child required different forms of attention, different approaches to parenting, a challenge Jamia met with remarkable resilience and dedication. To support this large family, Jamia maintained not 1 but 2 jobs. During daylight hours, she worked in retail, navigating customer service demands with the same warm smile her family described as her signature trait. When that shift ended, she often transitioned directly to her second position as a security guard. The contrasting roles, from customer-facing service to vigilant protection, showcased her adaptability and determination. These weren't just jobs to Jamia. They were lifelines for her children. Every hour worked, every difficult customer handled, every long night shift completed represented food on the table, clothes for growing bodies, and opportunities she was determined to provide. While many would have buckled under such pressure, those who knew Jamia described a woman who somehow maintained her positive outlook despite the exhaustion that must have accompanied her daily routine. She always kept a smile on her face, her mother, Tomanita Whitehorn, told local reporters after the tragedy. Jamia was a wonderful person, always willing to help others even when she had so little time for herself. She was a good parent, the kind who put her children before everything else. This sentiment was echoed by friends and extended family who described Jamia as the glue that held her family together. Despite the financial pressures and time constraints of single parenthood, she created a home environment where her children felt secure and loved. Birthday celebrations were planned with care. School achievements were celebrated regardless of how small, and family traditions were maintained even when it meant sacrificing her own rest. What makes Jamia's story particularly poignant is how ordinary her struggles were. In neighborhoods across Chicago and cities throughout America, mothers like her wake each day to similar challenges, balancing childcare with financial necessity, sacrificing personal ambitions for their children's futures. Finding moments of joy amid exhaustion, it's a reality rarely glamorized but lived by countless women whose strength often goes unrecognized until it's no longer there. The duality of Jamia's existence, Maya Dabadi online versus the devoted mother at home, wasn't a contradiction but a complement. The confidence she projected through her social media persona was the same strength that allowed her to face each day's challenges. The woman who posed for photos with self-assured smiles was the same one who stayed up late helping with school projects or working extra hours when bills mounted. Perhaps what's most striking about Jamia's life before tragedy struck was her normalcy. She wasn't a celebrity or public figure. She was a mother doing what mothers have always done, finding ways to make life work despite limited resources and unlimited demands. Her story resonates because it could be the story of a neighbor, a coworker, or a friend, someone whose daily acts of sacrifice go largely unnoticed until they're suddenly gone. In the weeks before her death, Jamia had been particularly focused on creating stability for her youngest children, while helping her older ones navigate the increasingly complex social worlds of pre-adolescence. Friends noted her concerns about raising children in a city where violence sometimes touched even the most careful families. She had recently been exploring the possibility of moving to a different neighborhood, hoping to provide her children with expanded opportunities and increased safety. This was the Jamia Taylor that headlines would later reduce to statistics, a 29-year-old shooting victim, a mother of 6. But understanding who she was in life is essential to comprehending the true magnitude of what was lost that February morning. When a bullet ended Jamia's life, it didn't just claim one victim, it fundamentally altered the trajectory of 6 young lives who had relied on her for everything. February in Chicago brings with it a particular kind of cold, the kind that seeps through layers and makes even short walks between venues feel like endurance tests. For most residents, it's a month to endure rather than celebrate. But for Jamia Taylor, February held special significance. It marked another year of life, another milestone reached despite the odds that often stack against young single mothers in urban America. Jamia's birthday fell on a Thursday that year, but like many working parents, she postponed her celebration until the weekend, when childcare arrangements would be easier to secure. She had been looking forward to this rare night out for weeks, mentioning it to co-workers and posting countdown updates on her social media accounts. "Finally gonna celebrate me for once?" Read one of her final posts, accompanied by a selfie that captured both excitement and the exhaustion of someone who rarely put themselves first. The Saturday night celebration began modestly. According to friends who were with her that evening, Jamia arranged for her mother to watch the children overnight, a rare luxury that allowed her to fully embrace the celebration without constantly checking her phone or worrying about getting home by a certain hour. She spent the early evening getting ready with 2 close friends at her apartment, the 3 women sharing drinks and stories as music played in the background. She was in such a good mood, one friend later told investigators. Kept saying how she deserved this night, how hard she'd been working. It was like she finally gave herself permission to just be Jamia, not just everybody's mom or employee for a few hours. The women left the apartment around 10 p.m., taking rideshare transportation to avoid the hassle of parking and to ensure everyone could enjoy the night safely. Their first stop was a restaurant where they met 3 additional friends for a late dinner. Security camera footage from the establishment would later show Jamia laughing, raising a glass in toast, her face animated in a way that those who knew her only in her parental role rarely witness. After dinner, around midnight, the group moved to a popular nightclub in the South Shore area, not far from 79th Street. The venue was known for its weekend crowds and hip-hop nights that often continued until the early morning hours. For Jamia, who rarely had time for such outings, the environment represented a brief escape from responsibility. A few precious hours where she could dance, socialize, and remember the person she was beyond her roles as mother and provider. Inside the club, Jamia's group secured a small table in the corner, but spent most of their time on the dance floor. Multiple witnesses would later recall seeing her throughout the night, noting her distinctive outfit, a red dress she had purchased specifically for her birthday celebration, and her energetic presence on the dance floor. Several people who knew her casually stopped by their table to wish her happy birthday, evidence of her connections within the community. What none of these well-wishers could know was that among the hundreds of faces in the crowded club that night, someone may have been watching Jamia with intentions far removed from celebration. Whether this person arrived separately or was already present when Jamia's group entered remains unclear in the investigation records. What is certain is that somewhere in that pulsing crowd, the paths of victim and perpetrator crossed, setting in motion events that would end with tragedy. Around 4:30 a.m., as the club began to thin out, security cameras captured Jamia checking her phone repeatedly. According to friends, she had received several text messages throughout the night, but had largely ignored them, determined to enjoy her rare evening of freedom. However, these late-night messages seemed to change her mood. She was observed in what appeared to be an intense conversation with someone near the bar area around 4:45 a.m., though the individual's face was not clearly visible on security footage. She seemed upset after checking her phone, one friend later stated. She told us she needed to handle something and might leave early. We offered to go with her, but she said it wasn't necessary. At approximately 5:10 a.m., Jamia told her friends she was stepping outside to get some air and possibly leave. The security footage shows her walking toward the exit alone, pausing briefly to speak with the bouncer, perhaps asking about rideshare availability or the safest way to exit the area at that hour. She appeared steady on her feet, but noticeably more subdued than earlier in the evening. The club's exterior camera captured her final moments of normalcy. Jamia Taylor, 29 years old, mother of 6, stepping out into the cold February air, her breath visible in the pre-dawn darkness as she glanced down at her phone one last time. She walked a short distance from the entrance, perhaps seeking privacy for a call or waiting for transportation. The camera's field of view ends at the corner of the building. Jamia walks out of frame at 5:18 a.m., turning right onto 79th Street. 5 minutes later, at 5:23 a.m., emergency services would receive the first call about gunshots in the area and an unresponsive woman on the sidewalk. What happened in those 5 minutes would transform a birthday celebration into a homicide investigation and forever alter the lives of 6 children waiting for a mother who would never come home. The transition from celebration to tragedy occurred in the span of minutes. At 5:18 a.m., security footage captured Jamia Taylor walking away from the nightclub, her red birthday dress visible under the streetlights of 79th Street. By 5:23 a.m., emergency dispatchers received the first of several 911 calls reporting gunshots and a woman down on the sidewalk approximately half a block from the club's entrance. The area where Jamia was found sits at the intersection of nightlife and early morning commerce in Chicago's South Shore neighborhood. As clubs were closing, the first food vendors and commuters were beginning to appear. This transitional time, not quite night, not yet day, created a scenario where potential witnesses were either leaving the area or just arriving, resulting in fragmented accounts of what actually occurred. According to the official police report filed by responding officers, a patrol unit was already in the vicinity conducting routine surveillance of club closings when the call came through. Officers arrived on scene within 2 minutes of the dispatch, finding Jamia lying on the sidewalk with a single gunshot wound to her chest. The report notes that she was unresponsive but with detectable pulse, when officers initiated emergency medical procedures. The responding officers immediately secured the scene, establishing a perimeter that would later expand to encompass nearly the entire block. Shell casing evidence suggested the shooting occurred where Jamia was found, rather than her having moved or been moved after being shot. This detail would become significant in the investigation, as it indicated she was likely confronted directly rather than caught in crossfire or shot from a distance. Emergency medical technicians arrived at 5:29 a.m., taking over life-saving efforts from the police officers. The EMT report describes finding Jamia in critical condition with significant blood loss and declining vital signs. They worked quickly to stabilize her for transport, applying pressure dressings and establishing IV access while moving her to the ambulance. Throughout this process, Jamia remained unconscious, unable to provide any information about her attacker. The ambulance departed for the University of Chicago Hospital at 5:30 a.m. with lights and sirens active. Hospital records indicate their arrival at 5:52 a.m., where a trauma team was standing by. Despite the rapid response and immediate intervention by emergency room physicians, the damage caused by the single bullet was catastrophic. The bullet had entered Jamia's chest at close range, tearing through critical blood vessels and causing internal bleeding that proved impossible to control. At 6:47 a.m., just as dawn was breaking over Chicago, Jamia Taylor was pronounced dead. The birthday celebration that had begun with such joy less than 12 hours earlier had ended in the sterile environment of a trauma bay, surrounded not by friends and family, but by medical professionals who had fought unsuccessfully to save her life. While medical teams worked to save Jamia, police at the scene began the methodical process of collecting evidence and interviewing potential witnesses. The timing of the shooting, that liminal space between night and morning, complicated their efforts. Many club patrons had already departed the area, while others were reluctant to speak with authorities. Those who did provide statements offered conflicting accounts of what they had seen or heard. One witness reported seeing Jamia speaking with someone in a dark vehicle shortly before the shooting, while another claimed to have observed a brief argument between Jamia and an unidentified individual near where she was found. A third witness mentioned hearing a single gunshot followed by the sound of running footsteps, but couldn't provide a description of anyone fleeing the scene. These fragmented accounts created a puzzle with missing pieces that investigators would spend weeks trying to assemble. The notification of Jamia's family began at 7:15 a.m. when two officers arrived at the home of Tamanata Whitehorn, Jamia's mother. Ms. Whitehorn had been caring for Jamia's 6 children overnight, while their mother celebrated her birthday. The officers' arrival at the family home created a scene that would forever be etched in the memory of everyone present. The quiet knock, the solemn faces of uniformed officers, and the devastating news delivered while 6 children slept nearby, unaware that their world had irrevocably changed. Ms. Whitehorn's reaction was captured in a statement she later gave to local media. "I collapsed. I just collapsed right there in my doorway. I kept thinking they had the wrong person, that my daughter was coming to pick up her babies later that day like she promised." How do you go from planning a birthday dinner to planning a funeral in the span of hours? The officers remained at the home while Ms. Whitehorn called other family members, creating a support network before the children awoke. The decision of how and when to tell the children became the family's first challenge in a new reality defined by absence. The oldest child, at 12, would understand the permanence of death, while the youngest, at just 11 months, would have no comprehension of why their mother never returned. By mid-morning, family members had gathered at Ms. Whitehorn's home, their grief compounded by the shock of violence and the pressing practical concerns that death always brings. Who would care for the children? How would funeral expenses be covered? What would happen to Jamia's apartment and possessions? These questions hung in the air alongside the more unanswerable one: why would someone take the life of a mother with so many depending on her? As news of the shooting spread through the community and appeared on local media, Jamia's social media accounts became impromptu memorials. Friends and followers posted messages of disbelief and condolence, sharing photos and memories of the woman they knew as both Jamia Taylor and Maya Dabadi. The contrast between birthday wishes posted just days earlier and condolence messages created a digital timeline of how quickly life can change. What do you think could have motivated this senseless act? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Back at the crime scene, investigators worked throughout the morning, collecting evidence that included a single shell casing, surveillance footage from nearby businesses, and cell phone data that might reveal who Jamia had been communicating with in her final hours. The investigation was assigned to CPD Area 4 detectives, who began the painstaking process of reconstructing Jamia's final moments and identifying potential suspects. The preliminary police report noted that while robbery wasn't ruled out as a motive, Jamia's purse and phone were found with her body, suggesting that theft may not have been the primary motivation. This detail, combined with witness statements about a possible argument, led investigators to consider whether Jamia might have known her killer, a theory that would gain traction as family members later suggested she had been experiencing conflicts with someone in her life. The investigation into Jamia Taylor's death began in earnest as CPD Area 4 detectives took control of the case file. Their approach followed standard homicide protocol, securing physical evidence, canvassing for additional witnesses, and building a timeline of the victim's final hours. The single shell casing recovered at the scene was entered into the National Ballistics Database, though no immediate matches were found to other crimes in the area. Detective Maria Suarez, the lead investigator assigned to the case, focused initially on Jamia's phone records and social media communications. In cases where robbery doesn't appear to be the primary motive, we often find that the victim's recent communications provide crucial context, Suarez explained in a departmental briefing. The text messages Jamia had received throughout her birthday celebration became a central focus, particularly those that appeared to change her mood in the club's final hours. While police maintained professional discretion regarding specific leads, Jamia's family offered insights that helped shape the investigation's direction. Tamanita Whitehorn, in her formal statement to detectives, mentioned that her daughter had recently expressed concerns about someone who had been causing problems in her life. "She didn't go into details with me, but I could tell something was bothering her," Whitehorn stated. Jamia was private about her personal struggles. "She didn't want to worry me when I was already helping with the children." This information led investigators to examine Jamia's relationships more closely, interviewing friends, co-workers, and acquaintances to identify potential conflicts. Several individuals were brought in for questioning in the weeks following the shooting, though police did not publicly identify any as suspect. The investigation continued with methodical attention to detail rather than rapid developments, a common pattern in homicide cases where the initial evidence doesn't point to an obvious perpetrator. As detectives pursued leads, the South Shore community responded to Jamia's death with an outpouring of support for her family. A candlelight vigil held 1 week after the shooting drew over 200 attendees, many of whom had never met Jamia personally but were moved by the circumstances of her death. Local businesses and community organizations established a fund to assist with funeral expenses and provide ongoing support for her 6 children. The funeral itself, held at Greater Harvest Baptist Church, became both a celebration of Jamia's life and a community statement against violence. Photos of Jamia with her children lined the entrance to the church, creating a visual timeline of a life devoted to family. The service featured testimonials from friends and family that painted a picture of a woman whose determination and love had touched many lives despite her young age. "Jamia gave everything to her children," her cousin remarked during the service. "Now it's our turn to give everything to them." This sentiment became the foundation for the family's approach to the aftermath, as they focused on creating stability for 6 children, navigating profound loss. The impact on Jamia's children varied by age and understanding. The older children experienced grief through questions about why their mother was taken and when justice would come, while the younger ones expressed their loss through behavioral changes and confusion about their mother's absence. Child psychologists who volunteered services to the family noted that the children's grief was complicated by the violent nature of their mother's death and the ongoing uncertainty about who was responsible. Custody arrangements fell primarily to Tamanita Whitehorn, who at 52 found herself raising grandchildren ranging from infancy to pre-adolescence. "I'm their grandmother, but now I have to be their mother too," she told community members who organized meal deliveries and childcare assistance. "Some days I don't know how we'll manage, but then I remember how Jamia never gave up, no matter how hard things got." Financial challenges quickly became apparent as the family adjusted to life without Jamia's income from her 2 jobs. Community fundraising provided immediate relief, but long-term concerns about housing, education, and childcare remained. Several local organizations stepped forward with offers of assistance, including scholarship funds for the children's future education and job placement services for family members who needed more flexible employment to accommodate childcare responsibilities. 3 months after the shooting, the investigation remains active but has yet to result in an arrest. Detective Suarez continues to pursue leads, including analyzing additional surveillance footage from businesses further from the crime scene that might have captured vehicles leaving the area. The case file remains open on her desk, with weekly updates submitted to her supervisor. "We're still actively investigating Ms. Taylor's death," the Chicago Police Department stated in their most recent press release. "We continue to follow multiple leads and encourage anyone with information to come forward. This case remains a priority for our detectives." For Jamia's family, the lack of closure compounds their grief. Each passing day without answers extends the trauma of February's events. Yet amid this uncertainty, they focus on honoring Jamia's memory through their care for her children, the 6 young lives that were the center of her world and now carry her legacy forward. Jamia Taylor's death represents more than an isolated tragedy. It's part of a pattern of gun violence that continues to affect Chicago communities. In 2024 alone, over 300 homicides have occurred in the city, with a disproportionate impact on neighborhoods like South Shore. When gun violence claims a parent's life, the ripple effects extend for generations. The 6 children Jamia left behind join thousands of others across Chicago who have lost parents to violence. Jamia's story reminds us that behind every statistic is a human being with dreams, responsibilities, and people who depend on them. Her children now face life without their mother, a preventable tragedy that demands our collective action. By strengthening community bonds, supporting prevention programs, and addressing root causes of violence, we honor Jamia's memory and work toward a future where birthday celebrations don't end in funeral services. In the quiet moments after school, when Jamia's children gather around their grandmother's dining table, glimpses of their mother emerge. A familiar laugh, a determined expression, mannerisms that genetics have preserved despite her absence. These 6 children, ranging from toddlerhood to the cusp of adolescence, now carry Jamia Taylor's legacy in ways she never could have imagined when she celebrated her final birthday. The cruel irony of Jamia's story lies in its timing. A day meant to celebrate her birth became the date that would later mark her death. The red dress she chose for her celebration, a symbol of joy and self-celebration, transformed overnight into an identifier in police reports and witness statements. Life's fragility has perhaps never been more starkly illustrated than in those 5 minutes between 5:18 a.m., when security cameras last captured her alive, and 5:23 a.m., when the first 911 calls reported gunshots. For those who knew Jamia, the lesson is painfully clear. Life offers no guarantees beyond the present moment. The text messages she didn't respond to, the conversations left for someday, the plans made for a future that vanished in an instant, all serve as reminders that tomorrow is promised to no one, especially in communities where violence remains a persistent threat. As her mother Tomanita said during a community memorial, "My daughter lived for her children. Now we must live for them too and make sure they know who their mother was, not just how she left this world, but how she lived in it, how she fought for them every single day." In neighborhoods across Chicago, countless other families navigate similar losses, their stories untold, but their pain no less profound. Each represents not just a statistic but a universe of connections, dreams, and potential extinguished too soon. If this story impacted you, please subscribe to Crazy Dark Files for more cases that remind us how precious life truly is. Hit the notification bell to never miss an upload. In the end, perhaps the most haunting aspect of Jamia Taylor's story isn't that justice remains elusive, but that somewhere in Chicago tonight, another mother is celebrating, another argument is escalating, and another family remains unaware that their world is about to change forever.